My phone buzzed during morning rounds at Children's Medical Center. The text from Dad made my stomach drop. "Don't come to Christmas Eve. Marcus's fiancée is a pediatric surgeon. We're celebrating her success." I stared at those words while standing outside the cardiac ICU where I just saved a 7-year-old's life. My family didn't know I was chief medical officer at the most prestigious children's hospital in our state. They thought I worked some ordinary administrative job. I typed back "understood" and slipped my phone away, unaware that in 4 days, Marcus's brilliant fiancée would walk into my office for her final interview, see my nameplate, and start screaming. The irony hit me like a freight train as I walked through the hospital corridors that December morning. Here I was, Jeffrey Morrison, 34 years old, and the youngest chief medical officer in Children's Medical Center's 112-year history, being told to skip Christmas because my family wanted to honor a pediatric surgeon. The same specialty I'd dedicated my life to mastering. My journey to this position hadn't been easy. After graduating summa cum laude from Johns Hopkins Medical School, I'd completed one of the most competitive pediatric surgery residencies at Boston Children's Hospital. Those were brutal years of 18-hour days sleeping in on call rooms, missing birthdays and holidays, while learning to repair tiny hearts and reconstruct malformed organs. But every sleepless night felt worth it when I held a newborn who would live because of my skills. 3 years ago, when Children's Medical Center offered me the chief medical officer position, I was stunned. At 31, I was younger than most department heads, let alone hospital executives. But my track record spoke volumes. I'd published 23 research papers, pioneered minimally invasive techniques for complex pediatric procedures, and maintained a patient survival rate that exceeded national averages by 12%. The promotion ceremony should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. I'd invited my parents Robert and Linda Morrison, along with my younger brother Marcus. They declined because it was the same evening as Marcus's girlfriend's 25th birthday party. "You understand, honey," Mom had said over the phone. "Sarah's only turning 25 once, but you'll have other work events." That night I stood alone at the podium accepting recognition for becoming the youngest CMO in the hospital's history while my family celebrated at a restaurant across town. My colleagues' families filled the audience, beaming with pride while my parents chose cupcakes and party games over witnessing my greatest professional achievement. Marcus had always been the golden child. 2 years younger than me, he possessed an effortless charm that made people gravitate toward him. While I buried myself in textbooks and medical journals, Marcus glided through social situations with ease. He'd started pre-med at the University of Michigan but dropped out sophomore year, claiming medicine wasn't his passion. Since then, he'd bounced between various jobs: marketing coordinator, restaurant manager, personal trainer, and most recently sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. Our parents never seemed disappointed by Marcus's career changes. Instead, they praised his willingness to explore different paths and his people skills. Meanwhile, my academic achievements were dismissed as just studying, and my medical career was seen as choosing the safe, boring option. The Christmas text was just the latest in a pattern that stretched back to childhood. While Marcus received expensive gaming systems and sports equipment, I got practical gifts like textbooks and desk organizers. When I was accepted to Johns Hopkins with a full scholarship, the celebration dinner lasted exactly 1 hour before conversation shifted to Marcus's high school football highlights. When I published my first research paper in the American Journal of Pediatric Surgery, Mom's response was, "That's nice, dear," before launching into a detailed account of Marcus's promotion to assistant manager at his restaurant. I'd stopped sharing my professional victories after the promotion ceremony incident. What was the point of announcing achievements to people who couldn't be bothered to show up? Instead, I threw myself deeper into my work, finding satisfaction in saving lives and advancing pediatric medicine. My personal life had suffered accordingly. Sarah Chen, a nurse practitioner in our pediatric oncology unit, had ended our 8-month relationship just 2 months ago. "You're married to this hospital, Jeffrey," she'd said during our final conversation. "I understand your work is important, but you use it to avoid real intimacy. Every time we get close, you retreat into patient charts and surgical schedules." She wasn't wrong. After years of family indifference, professional achievement had become my primary source of validation. Successful surgeries, research breakthroughs, and administrative accomplishments filled the emotional void left by family neglect. But late-night hospital rounds couldn't replace human connection, and departmental meetings couldn't substitute for meaningful relationships. Christmas was always the loneliest time. While other hospital staff rushed home to family gatherings and gift exchanges, I typically volunteered for holiday shifts. Someone needed to be available for pediatric emergencies, and it might as well be the person with nowhere else to go. This year, I'd already planned to order Chinese takeout, catch up on medical journals, and maybe watch a movie alone in my downtown apartment. The text from Dad felt like a final dismissal. Not only was I unwelcome at family Christmas, but the reason was celebrating another doctor's achievements. Someone my family actually respected enough to honor, unlike their own son, who dedicated his life to the same field. As I walked past the pediatric intensive care unit, I glanced through the window at tiny patients connected to monitors and ventilators. These children and their desperate parents had given my life purpose when my own family couldn't. Every successful surgery, every life saved, every breakthrough treatment justified the sacrifices I'd made. Even if my parents never understood the importance of my work, these patients and their families did. Little did I know that Marcus's mysterious fiancée would soon give me the opportunity to demonstrate exactly what kind of doctor I really was, and force my family to confront their own misconceptions about success achievement and the true meaning of healing. December 26th brought me back to the hospital with mixed emotions. While other families were enjoying extended holiday celebrations and leftovers from Christmas dinner, I found solace in the familiar rhythms of patient rounds and administrative responsibilities. The hospital felt peaceful during the holiday lull, with only emergency cases and skeleton crews maintaining operations. Patricia Rodriguez, our HR director, knocked on my office door around 10 in the morning. A seasoned professional with 15 years of healthcare administration experience, Patricia rarely seemed flustered, but today she appeared unusually animated as she clutched a thick personnel file against her chest. "Jeffrey, we need to discuss the final interview for the senior pediatric surgeon position," she announced, settling into the chair across from my desk. "The candidate arrives tomorrow for what should be a formality. Her credentials are absolutely extraordinary." She placed the file before me and opened it to reveal an impressive application. The name at the top made me pause. Dr. Amanda Walsh. I recognized it immediately from recent medical literature. Over the past 18 months, Dr. Walsh had published groundbreaking research on pediatric cardiac surgery techniques that had revolutionized treatment protocols at major hospitals nationwide. Her published work on minimally invasive pediatric heart surgery has been cited in over 200 research papers. Patricia continued enthusiastically. She's developed surgical approaches that have reduced recovery times by 40% while improving patient outcomes significantly. Every pediatric cardiac surgery program in the country is trying to recruit her. I studied Amanda's curriculum vitae more carefully. Her academic credentials were impeccable, graduating magna cum laude from Harvard Medical School, completing her residency at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, followed by a prestigious fellowship at Seattle Children's Hospital. Her research publications filled 3 pages focusing primarily on innovative surgical techniques for complex congenital heart defects. But something nagged at me as I reviewed her work history. Amanda had held positions at several top-tier hospitals over the past 5 years, never staying anywhere longer than 18 months. While such mobility wasn't uncommon in competitive medical fields, the pattern seemed unusual for someone building a research program that required long-term patient follow-up and sustained institutional support. Has she explained the frequent job changes? I asked Patricia, pointing to the employment timeline. She mentioned pursuing increasingly challenging opportunities and following research grants, Patricia replied. Very ambitious and driven. The kind of surgeon who pushes boundaries and seeks excellence. I nodded, but my instincts were sending warning signals. Years of medical training had taught me to trust those subtle feelings of unease, whether evaluating patient symptoms or assessing professional situations. Something about Amanda Walsh's profile felt too perfect, too polished, too convenient. After Patricia left, I decided to reach out to colleagues in my professional network. The medical community, despite its size, operated much like a small town when it came to sharing information about personnel and research developments. A few discreet phone calls could provide insights that formal references might not reveal. My first call went to Dr. Michael Roberts at Boston Children's Hospital, where I'd completed my residency. Mike had mentored dozens of pediatric surgeons and maintained extensive connections throughout the field. When I mentioned Amanda Walsh, his initial response was positive. Brilliant surgeon, incredible research mind, he said. Her work on pediatric cardiac techniques has influenced protocols here and at hospitals nationwide, but that pause set off alarm bells. In medical conversations, but often preceded crucial information that could change everything. But there were some concerns raised at the last American Academy of Pediatric Surgery conference. Mike continued carefully. Nothing official, just quiet conversations among colleagues. Some questions about data integrity in her research. You know how these things go, whispers and rumors that may mean nothing? I pressed for details, but Mike couldn't provide specifics. Medical professionals were naturally cautious about repeating unsubstantiated claims that could damage careers. However, his mention of data integrity concerns warranted further investigation. My next call went to Dr. Susan Martinez at Seattle Children's Hospital, where Amanda had completed her fellowship. Susan's response was more guarded. Amanda was certainly talented, she said diplomatically. Her surgical skills were exceptional, and she showed tremendous promise as a researcher. However, she left our program rather abruptly. The official reason was pursuing a better opportunity, but there were some internal discussions about her research methodology. When I asked for clarification, Susan suggested I speak with Dr. Richard Thompson, who had supervised Amanda's fellowship research. Unfortunately, Dr. Thompson was on vacation until after New Year's Day. The final call of the day went to Dr. Jennifer Park at Portland Children's Hospital. Jennifer's immediate recognition of Amanda's name surprised me. She interviewed here 6 months ago for a senior position, Jennifer revealed. Impressive presentation, outstanding credentials, but we ultimately decided not to extend an offer. There were concerns about the reproducibility of her research results when our team attempted to verify some of her published findings. This revelation sent chills down my spine. Research reproducibility was fundamental to medical science. If multiple institutions couldn't replicate Amanda's results, it suggested serious problems with her methodology data collection, or worse, deliberate falsification. I spent the evening reviewing Amanda's published research with renewed skepticism. Her papers described remarkable patient outcomes that exceeded national averages by margins that seemed almost too good to be true. The surgical success rates she reported were consistently perfect or near perfect, which was statistically improbable even for the most skilled surgeons. Moreover, her research methodology sections were surprisingly vague for such high-impact publications. Critical details about patient selection criteria, data collection protocols, and statistical analysis methods were either missing or described in terminology that made verification difficult. As Chief Medical Officer, I had access to medical databases that allowed me to cross-reference Amanda's claimed patient outcomes with actual reported statistics from her previous institutions. What I discovered kept me awake until 3 in the morning. The hospitals where Amanda had worked showed no corresponding improvements in pediatric cardiac surgery outcomes during her tenure. In fact, some institutions reported statistics that directly contradicted the success rates claimed in her publications. Either Amanda had been working with a completely different patient population than her colleagues, or her research data was fabricated. By the time I finally went to sleep, I faced a terrible dilemma. Amanda Walsh appeared to be a fraud who had built her reputation on falsified research, yet she was engaged to my brother and scheduled for a final interview at my hospital. Moreover, my family was preparing to celebrate her achievements without knowing they were honoring a potential criminal. The next morning would bring Amanda face to face with the one person who could expose her deception, though she had no idea that the administrative worker her fiancé's family dismissed was actually the chief medical officer who held her future in his hands. The morning of December 27th started with an unexpected phone call that would prove more painful than any surgical procedure I'd ever performed. I was reviewing patient charts in my office when my cell phone rang displaying "Mom" on the caller ID. Given our recent text exchange about Christmas Eve, I debated whether to answer. "Jeffrey, honey, I'm so glad I caught you." Mom's voice bubbled with excitement. "I had to tell someone about Marcus's fiancée, and since you work in healthcare, you might appreciate what an incredible woman he's found." I leaned back in my chair, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "Tell me about her." "Oh, Jeffrey, she's absolutely extraordinary. Amanda Walsh is a pediatric surgeon who saves children's lives every single day. Can you imagine she's published groundbreaking research that's changing how doctors operate on little hearts? She's brilliant, accomplished, and making a real difference in the world." Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. My mother was describing Amanda's fabricated achievements with the same enthusiasm she'd never shown for my actual accomplishments. The irony was devastating. "She's the kind of doctor who dedicates her life to helping others," Mom continued. "Not like those physicians who just chase money or work comfortable administrative jobs. Amanda is actually in there saving lives, pioneering new techniques, publishing important research. Marcus finally found someone as exceptional as he is." The comparison hit me like a physical blow. In my mother's mind, Amanda represented everything admirable about medical practice, while I was relegated to the category of money-focused administrators who avoided real medical work. She was praising Amanda's fabricated research achievements, while simultaneously dismissing the career I'd built on identical foundations. "That's wonderful," I managed to say, my voice carefully neutral. "What kind of research has she published?" "Oh, honey, you probably wouldn't understand the technical details," Mom replied dismissively. "It's very advanced cardiac surgery research. She's developed new ways to operate on children's hearts that are much safer and more effective. Hospitals all over the country are adopting her techniques. She's going to be famous someday." I was listening to my mother describe my own field of expertise as if it were beyond my comprehension. The research she was praising existed only in Amanda's falsified publications, yet it was receiving more family recognition than anything I'd ever achieved legitimately. "She makes such a beautiful couple with Marcus," Mom continued. "Two successful people who are really making their mark on the world. You know, Jeffrey, maybe you could learn something from Amanda about what real medical achievement looks like. She chose medicine to help people, not for the comfortable salary and regular hours." That comment shattered whatever emotional defenses I had left. My mother was suggesting I could learn about medical achievement from someone whose entire career was built on lies, while simultaneously implying that my motivation for becoming a doctor was purely financial. The woman who had missed my promotion ceremony was now lecturing me about medical dedication using a fraud as her example. "Marcus has always been special," she went on. "Even when he was struggling to find his path, we knew he had something unique. And now he's found someone who matches his caliber. Amanda chose him because she recognized his quality. She could have any man she wanted, but she saw something special in our Marcus. I closed my eyes, trying to process the full scope of what I was hearing. My family had created an entire mythology around Marcus and Amanda's relationship, casting them as exceptional individuals who had found each other through mutual recognition of shared superiority. Meanwhile, I remained the disappointing son who had settled for ordinary achievements in healthcare administration. Your father and I have been telling everyone about Amanda, Mom revealed. The Johnsons from next door, your Aunt Margaret, the people at church. We're so proud to have a real doctor joining the family, someone who's actually saving lives and making medical breakthroughs. The phrase real doctor echoed in my mind long after Mom hung up. In my family's perception, I wasn't a real doctor, despite 8 years of medical school and residency, despite performing hundreds of successful surgeries, despite leading a major hospital department. Amanda, with her fabricated credentials and falsified research, was the real doctor worthy of celebration and respect. I sat in my office, surrounded by medical textbooks, research journals, and patient files that represented 15 years of dedicated medical practice. Awards and certificates covered my walls, documenting achievements that had improved pediatric care for thousands of children. Yet my family dismissed all of it as administrative work while preparing to honor a fraud. The emotional manipulation was staggering in its completeness. Amanda had somehow convinced my family that her falsified research represented the pinnacle of medical achievement while simultaneously establishing that Marcus was exceptional enough to deserve such an accomplished partner. Meanwhile, my actual achievements were diminished to make space for their fictional success story. I began to understand the full scope of Amanda's manipulation. She hadn't just falsified research data. She had crafted an entire persona designed to appeal to people's desire to be associated with extraordinary achievement. My family's reaction proved how effective her strategy could be when people wanted to believe they were connected to greatness. But the deepest pain came from recognizing my family's capacity for enthusiasm and pride when they believed someone deserved it. The excitement in my mother's voice while describing Amanda's achievements showed me exactly what I'd been missing all these years. They were capable of celebration, recognition, and genuine pride. They simply didn't believe I merited those responses. As I prepared for Amanda's interview the next morning, I realized I was facing something much more complex than simple research fraud. I was confronting a master manipulator who had weaponized my family's dysfunction against me, using their need to feel important by association to create a web of lies that could destroy multiple lives. The question was no longer just whether to expose Amanda's fraud. It was whether I had the strength to reveal a truth that would force my family to confront their own capacity for self-deception and their history of neglecting their own son's legitimate achievements. That evening, I returned to my apartment with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since my surgical training days. If Amanda Walsh was indeed the fraud, I suspected I needed irrefutable evidence before taking any action. The stakes were too high for assumptions or incomplete investigations. I spent the night making carefully crafted phone calls to colleagues across the country. Medical professionals are naturally protective of their reputations and cautious about sharing potentially damaging information. So I approached each conversation as a fact-finding mission rather than an accusation. Dr. Jennifer Park at Portland Children's Hospital provided the first breakthrough. When I explained that Amanda was interviewing at our institution, Jennifer's tone shifted from polite to concerned. Jeffrey, I need to be careful about what I share, but I can tell you that our research team spent considerable time trying to replicate Amanda's cardiac surgery outcomes, she said. We implemented her published protocols exactly as described, but our results were dramatically different from what she reported. When we requested raw data to help identify variables, we might have missed her responses became evasive. Jennifer's revelation opened the floodgates for more detailed information. Dr. Brian Murphy at Denver Children's Hospital confirmed that Amanda had withdrawn her application there when they requested to verify her research data through independent statistical analysis. Dr. Carol Stevens at Minneapolis Children's shared that Amanda's claimed patient outcomes were statistically impossible given the case complexity she described. The pattern became clear as I continued my investigation. Amanda had been systematically applying to prestigious positions at major pediatric hospitals using her falsified research as credentials. When institutions began serious verification processes, she would withdraw applications and move on to the next target. But the most disturbing revelation came from Dr. Richard Thompson at Seattle Children's Hospital, whom I reached by phone at his vacation home in Colorado. Dr. Thompson had supervised Amanda's fellowship and was willing to share details that painted a chilling picture of systematic deception. Amanda was brilliant in the operating room, Dr. Thompson admitted. Her surgical technique was flawless and she had excellent bedside manner with patients and families. But her research was problematic from the beginning. She would submit data that seemed too perfect, with success rates that exceeded anything we'd seen in decades of pediatric cardiac surgery. Dr. Thompson explained that Amanda's research methodology involved selecting patient cases in ways that skewed outcomes dramatically. She would exclude patients with complicating factors, include cases that weren't actually performed by her, and manipulate follow-up timelines to avoid reporting delayed complications or failures. When I confronted her about the irregularities, she became defensive and accusatory, he continued. She claimed other faculty members were jealous of her success and trying to undermine her career. Eventually, she requested early termination of her fellowship, saying she'd found a better opportunity. We were honestly relieved to see her go. The conversation with Dr. Thompson revealed another disturbing aspect of Amanda's pattern. She had been building relationships with influential physicians and administrators at each institution using personal connections to deflect scrutiny of her research. When professional challenges arose, she would frame criticism as personal attacks motivated by jealousy or discrimination. I realized that Amanda's relationship with Marcus might represent the same manipulative strategy applied to personal relationships. By targeting someone with family connections, she could potentially leverage emotional pressure to influence professional decisions. My investigation took an unexpected turn when I contacted the American Board of Pediatric Surgery to verify Amanda's certification status. The representative I spoke with, Dr. Michelle Foster, revealed information that made my blood run cold. Dr. Walsh's certification is currently under review, she said carefully. There have been inquiries about the validity of some research used in her board certification application. I can't share specifics, but I can tell you that falsifying research data for board certification is a serious federal offense that can result in criminal charges. Federal charges meant that Amanda's deception extended beyond professional misconduct into criminal fraud. If she had used falsified research to obtain board certification, she was practicing medicine under fraudulent credentials, which could endanger patient safety at every institution where she worked. I spent the remainder of the evening documenting everything I'd learned. Amanda Walsh had built her entire career on fabricated research, manipulated patient selection criteria to create impossible success rates, and used personal relationships to deflect professional scrutiny. She was currently under federal investigation and had left a trail of concerned colleagues across multiple states. But the investigation also revealed something that made my stomach churn. Amanda had been researching my hospital specifically, and her application materials included references to our streamlined administrative processes and collaborative leadership approach. She had targeted Children's Medical Center because she believed a younger, less experienced chief medical officer would be easier to deceive than seasoned administrators. Through hospital security logs, I discovered that someone matching Amanda's description had visited our facility twice in the past month, claiming to be touring pediatric programs for educational purposes. She had been conducting reconnaissance, learning our protocols, and identifying potential weaknesses in our verification processes. The final piece of the puzzle came when I accessed Amanda's social media profiles through professional networking sites. Her posts revealed a calculated campaign to build credibility and influence. She regularly shared articles about pediatric surgery advances, commented on medical policy discussions, and positioned herself as a thought leader in the field. But buried within her online presence were clues about her relationship with Marcus. She had been posting about her wonderful fiancé whose family works in healthcare administration, and mentioning their upcoming engagement to someone with great family connections in medical leadership. Amanda had been using Marcus from the beginning, targeting him specifically because she had researched my family and identified potential leverage over my professional decisions. Her entire relationship with my brother was part of an elaborate scheme to compromise my judgment and secure a prestigious position through emotional manipulation. As I prepared for bed that night, I faced a terrible realization. Amanda Walsh wasn't just a fraud. She was a predator who had weaponized my family's dysfunction to further her criminal enterprise. She had identified Marcus as the perfect tool to pressure me into hiring her, exploiting my parents' favoritism and my own complicated family relationships. Tomorrow's interview would be more than a professional evaluation. It would be a confrontation between a dedicated physician committed to protecting patients and a dangerous fraud who had built her career on lies, manipulation, and exploitation of the people who trusted her most. The discovery came on a Friday afternoon, exactly 9 days after I had moved out. I was working from my new apartment, enjoying the ability to take client calls without worrying about family members entering my space unexpectedly, when my phone started receiving the flood of notifications that signaled the beginning of my family's panic. The security camera in my old living room captured the moment perfectly. Mom had arrived for her usual afternoon cleaning session, unlocking the door with practiced ease while balancing grocery bags, apparently intended to restock my refrigerator with healthier options. Her cheerful expression shifted to confusion as she noticed the subtle changes in my furniture arrangement, then to alarm as she began discovering the extent of missing belongings. I watched her move through the apartment with increasing agitation, opening closets and drawers to find them significantly emptied, calling my name as if I might be hiding somewhere in the space. She dropped her grocery bags on the kitchen counter and immediately called Dad, her voice carrying the high-pitched stress that indicated family crisis mode. Gary, something is wrong at Burton's apartment. Half of his things are gone. His computer is missing most of his clothes, all his important papers. It looks like he has been robbed. Dad arrived within 20 minutes, followed shortly by Emma, who had apparently been summoned from whatever she had been doing that afternoon. The three of them conducted a thorough search of my apartment, cataloging missing items while growing increasingly frantic about my whereabouts and safety. His bed is still here, Emma observed, and some of his furniture, but all his electronics are gone. His gaming console, his television, his laptop. Who would steal electronics but leave furniture? Maybe he interrupted a burglary in progress, Mom suggested hopefully. Maybe he is at the hospital or the police station filing a report. Dad's expression was more skeptical as he examined my space, with the analytical attention of someone trained to notice details. He opened my refrigerator, which contained only the items they had been stocking rather than anything I had purchased myself. He checked my bathroom, finding it notably lacking in the personal care items any resident would need for daily life. This was not a robbery, he announced after completing his investigation. Burton moved out. He took his important things and left enough behind to make it look like he still lives here. The revelation hit my mother like a physical blow. She sank into my remaining armchair with an expression of hurt and confusion that made my chest tighten with guilt despite everything they had done. But why would he move out without telling us? She asked plaintively. Where would he go? How long has he been gone? Emma's reaction was less sympathetic and more angry, as if my disappearance was a personal affront to her convenience and entertainment. He cannot just disappear like this. We have been checking on him for weeks and he never said anything about moving. This is completely insane. How are we supposed to know if he is okay? If we do not know where he is living? Dad pulled out his cell phone and began calling my number repeatedly, growing more frustrated as each call went straight to voicemail. I had blocked their numbers the day after moving, knowing that direct communication would only lead to manipulation and guilt trips designed to pressure me into revealing my location. His phone is going straight to voicemail, Dad reported. Either his battery is dead, or he is deliberately ignoring our calls. We need to call the police, Mom said urgently. Our son is missing. We have no idea where he is or whether he is safe. This could be anything from amnesia to kidnapping to mental breakdown. But Dad's postal service background had given him enough familiarity with official procedures to understand the limitations of what police could do in this situation. He is 28 years old, Dad explained patiently. He can move wherever he wants without telling anyone. The police will not treat this as a missing person case unless we have evidence of foul play or mental incapacity. An adult choosing to relocate without informing his family is not a crime. Emma slumped onto my couch with the defeated posture of someone whose comfortable routine had been suddenly disrupted. So, what are we supposed to do? Just wait around hoping he decides to contact us. What if something happens to him and we have no way of knowing? What if he gets sick or hurt and has no one to help him? He has coworkers, Dad pointed out. He has friends. He has a life outside of our family, even if he does not share much of it with us. But we are his family, Mom protested. We should be the first people he calls in an emergency. We should know where he lives and how to reach him. This is not normal, Gary. Children do not just vanish from their parents' lives without explanation. I found myself both fascinated and disturbed by their reactions. They were genuinely distressed about my disappearance, but their concerns seemed to focus more on their loss of control than on my actual welfare. They were upset that I had outmaneuvered their surveillance system, not that I had felt compelled to resort to such extreme measures to protect my privacy. Over the following days, my family launched an intensive campaign to track down my location. The cameras captured endless phone conversations as they contacted my workplace mutual friends, extended relatives, and anyone else who might have information about my whereabouts. Marcus proved to be an excellent ally during this period, deflecting their inquiries with polite but firm responses that revealed nothing useful while avoiding outright lies that might damage his relationship with them later. Burton asked me to respect his privacy right now. He would tell anyone who called. I know he is safe and doing well, but he needs some space to work through some personal issues. I am sure he will reach out when he is ready to reconnect. My parents also began calling my employer directly, attempting to verify that I was still working and to gather any information about my current living situation. My manager, Jennifer, handled their calls professionally, but revealed nothing beyond confirming that I remained employed and was performing my job duties satisfactorily. Employee personal information is confidential, she explained to Dad during one recorded conversation. I cannot discuss Burton's address, emergency contacts, or any other private details with family members unless he has specifically authorized me to do so. Emma's reaction to my disappearance revealed the extent to which she had been depending on my apartment for her social and emotional needs. Without access to my space, she had no quiet place to conduct job interviews over video calls, no reliable internet connection for online applications, and no impressive address to give potential employers or dating prospects. The cameras captured her meltdown as she realized the full impact of my absence on her life. I had a phone interview scheduled for Monday, she told our parents through tears. I was going to use Burton's apartment because the connection is better there and it looks more professional in the background. Now, I will have to do it from my bedroom here. And it looks like I live with my parents, because I do live with my parents. We will help you figure something out, Mom assured her, though her own stress was evident in her voice. Maybe we can clean up the living room and set up a professional-looking space for your interview, It is not just about the interview, Emma continued. I have been telling people that I live in downtown Phoenix. I have been using his address for applications and dating profiles. Now what am I supposed to do? Tell everyone that I lied about having my own place. Dad's expression darkened as he processed the implications of what Emma had just revealed. You have been using Burton's address without his permission for job applications and dating. He never said I could not, Emma replied defensively. And it is not like it was hurting him. I was just trying to make myself look more independent and successful than I actually am. Emma, that could be considered fraud if you were using his address for official documents, Dad warned. And it definitely explains why he might have felt his privacy was being violated. But Mom was not ready to acknowledge that their behavior might have contributed to my decision to disappear. Burton should have talked to us about his concerns instead of just vanishing, she insisted. Families work through problems together. They do not just abandon each other without explanation or discussion. I realized that they were incapable of seeing the situation from my perspective. In their minds, I was the selfish child who had abandoned his loving family rather than the adult who had been forced to take extreme measures to protect his privacy and independence. They had convinced themselves that their surveillance and control were expressions of love, which made my rejection of that treatment feel like a rejection of their love itself. But I also noticed that none of them had acknowledged or apologized for their invasion of my apartment. They were focusing entirely on my response to their behavior rather than examining the behavior that had prompted my response. Their distress was real and painful to watch, but it was also self-centered in a way that confirmed my decision to maintain distance until they could learn to respect my boundaries. As the days passed without any contact from me, their panic began to shift into more concerning territory. 2 weeks after my family discovered my disappearance, their panic escalated into actions that confirmed my worst fears about their willingness to respect boundaries and privacy. The security cameras captured increasingly desperate conversations as they discussed hiring a private investigator to locate me against my will. I found a detective agency that specializes in finding missing family members, Dad announced during one of their daily strategy sessions in my abandoned apartment. They can trace credit card usage, employment records, housing applications, all kinds of digital footprints that normal people cannot access. Is that legal? Emma asked, though her tone suggested she was more interested in effectiveness than legality. I mean, he is not actually missing. He just does not want to talk to us. He is our son, Mom replied firmly. We have a right to know where he is and whether he is safe. If he will not tell us voluntarily, then we will find out another way. I realized that my family's respect for my autonomy extended only as far as it did not inconvenience their desire for control. When I had tried to set boundaries through direct conversation, they had dismissed my concerns as unreasonable. Now that I had set boundaries through action, they were planning to violate those boundaries through professional surveillance. But their mention of legal action triggered a memory of something Marcus had suggested during our initial conversation about the security footage. I called my friend and asked for the name of the employment attorney his sister had used during a workplace harassment case. Sarah Henderson's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Phoenix high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the desert landscape surrounding the city. Her reception area conveyed professional competence without unnecessary luxury, exactly the kind of environment where I could feel confident about receiving honest legal advice. Sarah herself was a woman in her early 40s with graying auburn hair and the focused intensity of someone who had built her practice by taking on cases that other attorneys might consider too complicated or emotionally charged. Marcus told me you are dealing with some family boundary issues, she said as we settled into her office conference area. Why do not you walk me through what has been happening and what kind of outcome you are hoping to achieve? I spent the next hour describing my family's behavior, showing her selected footage from my security cameras, and explaining the escalating pattern of invasion that had led to my decision to relocate without informing them of my new address. Sarah listened with the careful attention of someone trained to identify legal issues within personal conflicts, asking clarifying questions about timelines, documented evidence, and my previous attempts to address the situation through direct communication. "You have documented evidence of several potentially criminal activities," she informed me once I had finished my presentation. "Unauthorized entry into your apartment could constitute trespassing, even though they had a key you originally provided. Their access to your financial accounts and personal documents without permission could qualify as identity theft or fraud. Your sister's use of your address for official applications definitely constitutes fraud." "I do not want to send my family to jail," I said quickly. "I just want them to leave me alone and respect my privacy." "I understand," Sarah replied. "But sometimes the threat of legal consequences is the only thing that motivates people to change behavior they have convinced themselves is justified. Your family has already demonstrated that they will not respect boundaries you set through conversation. They may need to understand the potential legal ramifications of their actions before they take your concerns seriously." Sarah explained that we could begin with a formal cease and desist letter that outlined their problematic behaviors, referenced specific legal statutes they were violating, and demanded that they stop all unauthorized contact and surveillance activities immediately. "The letter serves several purposes," she explained. "First, it puts them on official notice that their behavior has legal implications they may not have considered. Second, it creates a paper trail that demonstrates you attempted to resolve this matter outside of court. Third, if they continue their problematic behavior, after receiving the letter, it provides evidence of willful violation that strengthens any future legal action." We spent another hour crafting a letter that addressed each element of my family's invasion while maintaining a tone that was firm but not unnecessarily hostile. Sarah understood that my goal was to restore a healthy relationship with my family, not to punish them for their past mistakes. The letter detailed their unauthorized apartment entries, their access to my financial and personal information, Emma's fraudulent use of my address, and their current plans to hire private investigators to locate me against my will. It referenced specific Arizona statutes regarding trespassing, identity theft, and fraud, while demanding immediate cessation of all surveillance and contact attempts. "We will send copies to each family member individually," Sarah advised. "That way, no one can claim they were not properly informed of the legal issues involved." 3 days later, I received a call from Sarah informing me that my parents had contacted her office requesting a meeting to discuss the situation. They had been shocked to discover the legal implications of their behavior and wanted to explore options for resolution that would not result in criminal charges. "Your father seemed particularly concerned about the identity theft allegations," Sarah reported. "Apparently, he had not realized that accessing your accounts without permission could result in felony charges regardless of his relationship to you or his motivations." The meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday in Sarah's conference room, with my parents, Emma, Sarah, and myself all present to discuss terms for moving forward without legal action. I felt nervous about seeing my family again after weeks of separation, but also relieved that they were finally taking my concerns seriously enough to seek professional mediation. The conference room felt formal and intimidating in a way that seemed appropriate for the gravity of our situation. My parents sat across from me looking older and more fragile than I remembered, while Emma fidgeted with nervous energy that suggested she was finally understanding the potential consequences of her behavior. Dad spoke first, his voice carrying the subdued tone of someone who had received a harsh wake-up call about the reality of his actions. "Burton, we had no idea that what we were doing could be considered criminal. We thought we were just being concerned parents helping our son maintain his apartment and manage his finances." "The road to hell is paved with good intentions," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Many criminal cases involve people who believed their motivations justified actions that violated other people's rights." Mom looked close to tears as she addressed me directly for the first time in weeks. "We miss you terribly." We have been so worried about your safety and well-being. We just want our family to be close and supportive of each other." "I want that too," I replied honestly. "But I need you to understand that love and support cannot come at the expense of basic respect for my privacy and independence." Emma's apology was the most difficult for me to hear because it revealed how much her behavior had been driven by her own insecurity and desperation rather than malicious intent. "I am sorry for using your address and treating your apartment like it was mine," she said quietly. "I was embarrassed about still living with mom and dad at 25, and I thought borrowing your success would help me feel better about my own failures." Sarah facilitated our conversation with the skill of someone experienced in helping families navigate complex emotional and legal terrain. By the end of our 2-hour session, we had established clear agreements about future contact and boundaries. My family would respect my decision to maintain a private address and would not attempt to locate or visit me without invitation. They would remove themselves from any accounts they had accessed without permission and would not attempt to monitor my financial or personal activities. Emma would correct any fraudulent address information she had provided to employers or other institutions. In exchange, I agreed to maintain regular contact through phone calls and email to attend family gatherings when invited with reasonable notice, and to allow gradual rebuilding of our relationship based on mutual respect and appropriate boundaries. The legal threat had accomplished what months of direct conversation could not. My family finally understood that their behavior had crossed legal lines that could result in serious consequences, and they were motivated to change their approach to our relationship. But more importantly, the mediation process had forced all of us to acknowledge the underlying issues that had created this crisis. My parents had to confront their inability to let me function as an independent adult. Emma had to face her own insecurities and poor choices, and I had to recognize my own role in enabling their behavior by not setting clearer boundaries earlier. 6 months after that confrontational meeting in Sarah Henderson's conference room, I sat in my Desert Vista Springs apartment, preparing for a family dinner that would have been unimaginable during the darkest period of our conflict. The transformation in our relationships had been gradual, sometimes difficult, but ultimately profound in ways that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. The legal intervention had provided the shock my family needed to recognize how destructive their controlling behavior had become. Dad later admitted that receiving an official letter referencing potential felony charges had been the wake-up call he needed to understand that good intentions do not justify violating another person's rights and privacy. I kept telling myself that I was just being a concerned father. He confessed during one of our monthly coffee meetings that had become a cornerstone of our rebuilt relationship. But when I saw those words on legal letterhead talking about identity theft and fraud, I realized that my concern had turned into something ugly and controlling. Mom's journey toward respecting my independence had been more emotionally challenging because she had to confront how much of her identity was wrapped up in being needed by her adult children. The family therapy sessions that Sarah had recommended became a crucial part of her growth process. "I thought that if you did not need me anymore, it meant I had failed as a mother," she explained during a particularly honest conversation. "I was so afraid of being left behind that I tried to make myself essential to your daily life instead of trusting that you would stay connected because you wanted to, not because you had to." The therapy sessions had helped our parents understand that healthy families support independence rather than discouraging it, and that true love means wanting the best for someone, even when their best does not include constant parental supervision. Emma's transformation had been the most dramatic and inspiring to witness. The crisis had forced her to confront her own lack of direction and the ways she had been using my apartment and address to avoid dealing with her real problems. "I was so embarrassed about my life that I was basically trying to live yours instead," she told me during a sibling lunch that had become another regular part of our new family dynamic. "Using your apartment, your address, even your success to make myself feel better about my failures. It was not fair to you, and it was not helping me actually improve my situation." The consequences of her fraudulent address usage had been immediate and sobering. Several potential employers had discovered the discrepancy during background checks, eliminating her from consideration for positions she might otherwise have obtained. The experience had taught her that shortcuts and deceptions ultimately create more problems than they solve. But Emma had used the wake-up call as motivation for genuine change. She had enrolled in a certification program for digital marketing, moved into a modest studio apartment that she could actually afford, and begun building a life based on her own achievements rather than borrowed success. Having my own place, even though it is tiny and kind of ugly, feels so much better than pretending to live in your nice apartment, she said with obvious pride. I know that every piece of furniture, every decoration, every monthly rent payment represents my own work and choices. The most surprising development had been Emma's blossoming relationship with independence itself. Once she stopped using my apartment as a crutch, she discovered that she actually enjoyed the challenge of building her own life. Her confidence had grown along with her job prospects, and she had begun dating someone who respected her ambitions and supported her goals. Our parents had undergone their own major life changes as well. The crisis had forced them to examine how much of their energy had been focused on managing their adult children's lives instead of developing their own interests and relationship as a couple. They had sold their large suburban house and moved into a smaller townhome that better suited their actual needs, rather than their desire to maintain space for adult children who might need to move back home. The downsizing had freed up financial resources that allowed Dad to pursue woodworking hobbies he had always wanted to explore, while Mom had returned to school to complete the accounting degree she had abandoned when Emma and I were young. We realized that we were so busy trying to control your life and Emma's life that we had forgotten how to live our own lives, Dad explained. Retirement should have been about pursuing our own interests, not about finding new ways to be essential to our children. The physical distance created by their move had actually brought us closer emotionally. Our weekly phone calls felt more natural and enjoyable when they were about sharing news and staying connected rather than about monitoring and managing my daily activities. The change in our family dynamics had also affected my personal life in unexpected ways. The confidence I had gained from successfully setting boundaries with my family had carried over into other relationships, including a growing romance with Sarah Henderson that had begun months after our legal consultation concluded. I was impressed by how thoughtfully you handled such a difficult family situation. Sarah told me when I asked her what had initially attracted her to me personally rather than professionally. You were hurt and angry, but you never lost sight of your goal to preserve the relationship while protecting your boundaries. That kind of emotional maturity is rare. Our relationship had developed slowly and carefully, built on a foundation of mutual respect for independence and privacy that felt revolutionary compared to the enmeshed family patterns I had grown up accepting as normal. Tonight's family dinner would be the first time Sarah would meet my parents and Emma in a social context rather than a legal one. I felt nervous about the introduction, but also excited to share this new chapter of my life with family members who had learned to celebrate my happiness rather than trying to control it. The restaurant I had chosen was a casual Italian place that specialized in family-style meals with comfortable seating and an atmosphere that encouraged relaxed conversation. As I waited for everyone to arrive, I reflected on how much had changed since that terrible night when I discovered my family treating my apartment like their second home. The hurt and anger from that period had not disappeared completely, but they had been transformed into something more productive. I understood now that my family's controlling behavior had been motivated by genuine love and concern, even though their methods had been completely inappropriate and damaging. More importantly, I had learned that setting boundaries was not selfish or cruel, but necessary for healthy relationships. By refusing to tolerate behavior that violated my privacy and independence, I had forced my family to find better ways to express their care and concern. Sarah arrived first looking relaxed and professional in a casual dress that struck exactly the right tone for meeting my family in a social context. We had talked extensively about this dinner and what it represented in terms of my journey toward healthy family relationships. "How are you feeling about tonight?" she asked as we waited for my parents and Emma to join us. "Grateful." I replied, surprising myself with the honesty of that response. 6 months ago, I thought I might have to choose between having a relationship with my family and having my independence. Tonight feels like proof that I can have both. My parents arrived next looking happier and more relaxed than I had seen them in years. The stress of constantly worrying about and managing their adult children's lives had lifted, replaced by the contentment that comes from pursuing your own interests and trusting your children to handle their own challenges. Emma was the last to arrive, apologizing for running late due to a client call for her new freelance marketing business. The confidence and energy she radiated felt like a completely different person from the defeated young woman who had been living in our parents' house and using my apartment to avoid facing her real problems. Dinner conversation flowed naturally among topics that would have been impossible during our period of crisis and estrangement. Emma talked about her business goals and recent client successes. Dad described his latest woodworking project with enthusiasm that reminded me of my own passion for software development. Mom shared stories from her accounting classes and her plans for finding part-time work that would use her new skills. Sarah fit seamlessly into our family dynamic, asking thoughtful questions and sharing appropriate stories about her own life and career. But what struck me most was how naturally my family accepted her presence without trying to interrogate her or gather information they felt entitled to possess. "Burton mentioned that you specialize in employment law," Mom said to Sarah over dessert. "That must be fascinating work. Do you enjoy helping people navigate workplace challenges?" The question was genuinely interested, rather than invasive, seeking to understand Sarah as a person, rather than to evaluate her suitability as a romantic partner for their son. The restraint and respect felt miraculous compared to their previous approach to anyone who entered my life. As dinner wound down and we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside for a brief private conversation that captured everything positive about our transformed relationship. "I want you to know how proud I am of the man you have become," he said quietly. "Not just professionally, but personally. The way you handled our family crisis showed real maturity and wisdom. You stood up for yourself without destroying the relationships that mattered to you. That takes real strength and character." The praise meant more to me than any approval I had received during my childhood and adolescence, because it was based on recognition of my adult capabilities rather than compliance with parental expectations. "I also want to thank you for not giving up on us," he continued. "It would have been easier to just cut us off completely after everything we put you through. But you found a way to help us learn and grow instead of just punishing us. That says a lot about the kind of person your mother and I raised, even if we lost sight of that for a while." The drive home to my Desert Vista Springs apartment felt symbolic of the journey our family had taken over the past year. I was returning to a space that belonged completely to me, where my privacy and independence were absolutely protected. But I was also carrying with me the warmth and connection that comes from healthy family relationships built on mutual respect rather than control and obligation. Sarah and I talked about the dinner as we settled into my living room with tea and comfortable silence. "They really have changed," she observed. 6 months ago, your mother was photographing coffee cups in your sink as evidence of poor hygiene. Tonight, she complimented my career without asking about my salary or family background. That represents a fundamental shift in how they approach relationships. "I think they finally understand that love and control are not the same thing," I replied. "And they learned that trying to prevent your children from making mistakes just prevents them from learning how to handle challenges independently." As I reflected on everything that had led to this moment, I realized that the crisis had ultimately strengthened our family in ways that would never have been possible under our old dysfunctional patterns. My parents had discovered interests and happiness that were independent of their children's lives. Emma had built genuine confidence and success that belonged to her alone. And I had learned to set boundaries that protected my well-being while maintaining important relationships. The most valuable lesson from our experience was understanding that real love requires respecting other people's autonomy, even when their choices make you uncomfortable or worried. My family's attempts to control my life had been motivated by love, but they had caused damage because control and love cannot coexist in healthy relationships. True family support means celebrating each other's independence rather than trying to limit it. It means offering help when asked rather than imposing assistance when it is not wanted. It means trusting that people you raised with good values will make good choices even when those choices differ from what you would prefer. The happy ending we had achieved was not about returning to our previous relationship patterns. It was about building entirely new patterns based on respect, boundaries, and genuine care for each other's well-being and happiness. Tonight had proven that families can recover from serious breaches of trust and respect when all parties are willing to acknowledge their mistakes, change their behavior, and commit to healthier ways of relating to each other. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who thought they were just trying to help? Learning to distinguish between supportive concern and controlling behavior can be one of the most challenging aspects of building healthy adult relationships, even with people who love us. Thank you for taking this journey with me and allowing me to share how my family learned that true love means respecting independence rather than trying to control it. I hope this story encourages anyone struggling with similar challenges to remember that you deserve privacy and autonomy in your own life, and that setting boundaries is an act of self-respect that can ultimately strengthen your most important relationships. If you found value in this story, please consider subscribing to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthier relationships. Like this story. If it resonated with your own experiences, share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of boundaries. And let me know in the comments about your own experiences with setting limits while preserving love. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that remind us all that we deserve to be treated with respect and dignity by the people who claim to care about us most.